So in today's video, I'm just gonna go into Photoshop and show you guys a couple little tips and I guess tricks that I like to use in Photoshop just to help my creative process go a little quicker, and hopefully I can answer some questions that any of you might have who are new to Photoshop. Alright, welcome back to Painted Kids. So today I decided that I just wanted to give you guys some quick tips for starting in Photoshop. I don't know how many of you guys use Photoshop or thinking about using Photoshop, and there's just a couple little tips that I wanted to share with you that just make using Photoshop so much easier, make my process go so much faster. Yeah, so I decided that I would share a little bit with you today. So the file I have up is my Captain Marvel file, and I'm just using this one. It was just my most recent project, and I figured I would just use this to kind of walk you through. So my first tip, I guess you could say, I wanted to show you guys how I scan images in and then prepare them for my paintings. So what I usually end up doing is, more often than not, I'll sketch in my drawing pad and then I'll scan the image into my computer and then I drop it into Photoshop, or I take a picture of it. Lately my scanner has been broken, so that's been my preferred method right now, is to take a picture of it and then email it to myself and then drop it into Photoshop. So and usually it ends up like this. I turned off all my other layers and I reloaded the image so that way I could show you guys here. So you usually end up with an image like this. It'll most likely be a JPEG or a PDF. And let me just show you guys here real quick. So I have my brush here. Let me choose a color you guys can actually see. I'll go with red. So I have my brush here. Let's say I've dropped my image in, so now I'm ready to color. Well, you can see here, I don't know, boop up my opacity real quick. Here we go. That as I go, I can't paint on top of it, because then I paint on top of my actual drawing, and I can't go underneath it because you can't see anything. So the way to set this up so that way you can actually paint underneath it, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, why don't you just use the bucket tool and just fill in the lines? I personally don't like doing that because I like having my line drawing separate from my color, so that way I can more easily do exactly what I want to do, manipulate it the way I want to manipulate it. So there are two ways you can do this. One way, so you just come up here and you're in your Photoshop, you select the Select tab, and you can go down to the color range. So you click the color range, and then you have this little eyedropper tool, and then you have this little display up here. So what you do is you just click what you want to get rid of. So I want to get rid of the white background, so I click that. And if it's like if you have a lot of gray or other things that are in the background that you want to get rid of, you just hold down the Shift key, and then you just kind of do the eyedropper tool all the way around and get rid of things. Okay, so then you click OK, and you'll see that I have these little like lines and like these little moving edges, and it changes my image a little bit. And then I just click Delete. And then once I clicked delete, you hit Command D, and that deselects it. So now I have my layer set up, I have my underlayer, and if I pick my brush, and I'm going to be picking a color again, it's red, and now I can color under my image. And I'll show you that I'm not drawing on top of it because I know my brush is going outside the lines, but see? And I can erase all over my drawing and it doesn't affect my drawing. So that's usually what I do when I'm just scanning things in. It makes it super simple. And then another way you can do it too, same thing. So sometimes I end up with, like if I'm sketching and I've done a lot of erasing, I'll end up with like a ton of lines behind my image. So that's where that eyedropper tool comes in, is I can hold down shift and pick a couple different colors to get rid of. But sometimes even that doesn't work. So what I'll end up doing is if I can't get it all with that, and I don't want to spend the time erasing, you upload your image, you click on image on your image tab, you pick your mode, grayscale, and then click grayscale. And then once that's done, you can come over to the select tab and click load selection. And then there's nothing selected. Let me hear. Select load selection. I guess that's not going to let me. Oh, okay. There you go. And then it just outlines it again. And the nice thing is that if you need to adjust, you can go into your exposures and adjust your blacks and your whites to select it. But yeah, so it does the same thing. Then you can delete the background and then just deselect again. So those are the two ways that you can clean up your image in order to get it ready for Photoshop. Now, the next thing that I wanted to show you guys was the multiply layer. So over here on your layers, okay, so over here on your layers, these are all my fun layers that I have from working on the project before. And I have a layer on here that's called shadow. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change this to normal and then bring up my opacity and kind of show you what it is. And if you watched my speed drawing, you would see me, like I started coloring on here with just this blue color. I usually do the complementary to my light source when I choose the color for shadow. So my light source was pretty orange and yellowy, so I chose a blue color. And I'll just pick your average color, like nothing special. And then what I do to get it the shadow look is I can come over here on my panel and you have all your layers. And there's normal, you'll see, and then opacity, and that's 100%, and then underneath that is fill. So what I usually do is you can start with taking down your opacity. And I usually, depending on the light source, I'll adjust it accordingly. So you can either make it super light, super dark. So I adjust the opacity, but it still looks like blue. It doesn't look like a shadow. So the way we make it look like a shadow is we come over here and so you have all these different types of layers that you can choose from. Well, for shadows, I use multiply. Now multiply, what it does is it grabs a color and you can basically is detecting that color. So it makes it look and feel like a shadow. And there you go. So, but don't, if you have a specific blue that you're working with your shadow and you're painting and then somehow you lose that color, so you're like, oh, let me grab my eyedropper and I'll pick up that same color, you'll want to change the layer back to normal, because if you don't, it'll just pick up the shadow color, and then when you paint with that, it looks different. So it's not that color because it's on multiply. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to show you guys, so I showed you my multiply, I showed you how I get my illustrations ready for painting, and now I wanted to show you guys the gradient tool. I really like using it for more of a dramatic effect, like if I'm trying to do something like foggy or like get something really atmosphere-esque, if that makes any kind of sense. So just really playing around with atmosphere or backgrounds. I use this a lot in my backgrounds because it's fun. So let me pick out some colors here that I want to work with. Okay, so with the gradient tool, it's pretty simple. It's in your bucket, so if you come over here and you hold your mouse over, you have to actually click it and hold. It'll give you three options: gradient tool, paint bucket tool, and 3D material drop tool. So I selected the gradient tool, so you still have to be pushing down and move over and select your gradient tool. Okay, so when you pick your gradient tool, so you go over to the paint bucket like I showed you, then you choose your colors. And then you want to come up here and you want to select what kind of gradient you want to use. There's a million different ways you can use this. but I always use, you see the little checkered box one, so it has a little bit of color than checkered. You want this one because if you choose the ones without the checkered, it's going to cover the whole page, and you don't, like, if you have a very, like, for starting your background, definitely, but if you have things in the foreground that you want to be affected by it, but you don't want it to take up and overshadow your background, that's what you want to select up there. And it's just right up there. As soon as you click the gradient tool, this little box will pop up so you can choose. Okay. So now I'm going to come over here and create a new layer, and I'm going to do this in my background. Oh, let me try. You should see how it looks with if I stick it on top, so it kind of overlaps herself. All right, so here we go. And I think I'm actually going to do this darker orange. So you just start at the bottom and you hold and you drag and then release. And then it kind of gives you this fun gradient mist effect. And as you can see, the farther I drag it out, the thinner it gets. So it's not like it's just going to be solid all the way around. That's kind of fun. So what you can do is, so once you get the gradient tool, you're like, oh, well, that's great, but you really can't see your illustration anymore. Well, the great thing about this tool is you can come over to your opacity, you can play around with your opacity, and you can knock it back, and it can give it a really fun effect. Now, what you can do on top of this, too, is you can take the different layers, and you can actually layer on top of others. So I do one layer, and then I can add another. So the gradient tool is really good when it comes to, you know, making some sort of haze or fog or something a little bit more eerie, or just adding a little bit more depth. I don't do this in, you know, every single piece that I do, but it's a kind of a fun effect, especially if you're doing backgrounds and you're trying to create depth. This is a great way to do it. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to share with you guys is another, I guess this is more so just a tip rather than a you know, cool trick that you can do in Photoshop. So recently, Photoshop, the last time it updated for me, they have officially come up with a organization system for your brushes. So now they're not just all over the place, you can actually put them in folders. So I highly recommend you take the time to do this especially if you're starting out with a newer version of Photoshop. And what you do, brushes and charcoal brushes. So what I did was I went through and I just categorized all of them based on, you know, you can organize them any way you want. And the way you do it is you just grab your mouse and you can right click and you can click on new brush group. And what it does is it pulls it up. And so let's see, we'll do test folder. Okay, then I click OK. And now I have a new folder. And it's already open and ready to go. You can see it's in between my my spray folder. So I can just literally just grab brushes, and then the folder will highlight in a blue box, as you can see, and you can drop it. And now it's in that folder. So then voila. And it looks like my test folder has fallen into my charcoal folder. So I just drag it up, and as long as there is a straight line, there it goes, it will go in between. So if you want it inside, you have to wait for the box all the way around. And then if you want to put brushes, and even inside your folders, you can reorganize your brushes. So if you don't like the way that the sizing is, or you want it a specific way, you can just switch it around here, like so. So yeah, so those were my little tips for Photoshop. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. You know, subscribe. Let us know if there are any specific questions you have in Photoshop. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer your questions, especially if it's pertaining specifically to Photoshop. Let me help you along. You know, we all were beginner artists at some points, and I would be more than happy to answer questions. Thanks for watching, you guys, and keep a lookout for our next video, and we'll see you next time.